This man is an extremely good god of medicine. No matter what serious illness he encounters, as long as he touches the pulse in the wrist, he can know how the patient's health condition is. His treatment is also very simple. Use a few silver needles to treat the patient, but he has a habit of going to work on time. No matter which step he is treating the patient, as soon as hearing the bell ring, he will stop working. Heoim's famous medical skills spread to the palace. An emperor sent people to invite him to see his illness. When Heoim entered the palace, he confidently took out the needles, just taking a look. He knew the emperor's illness as well as how to insert the needles. But when he got closer to the emperor's head, his hands suddenly trembled. And so Heoim was ordered to be arrested by the emperor because he could not acupuncture. To escape, Heoim only had no choice but to run fast. But the soldiers behind him chased after him. He was not only hit by an arrow in the chest, but also fell into the water. Then Heoim also regained consciousness, but strangely, the wound on his chest healed inexplicably, and everything around him also changed completely. Until he regained his senses, he realized that the place where he used to live had been turned into stone statues, and the people passing by looking at his clothes all felt weird. It turned out that the Heoim had traveled through time, and had been moved to a place without knowing anything about it. Heoim could only wander on the streets. At this time, a girl suddenly screamed. The reason was that her boyfriend suddenly fainted. Heoim witnessed this from the beginning, so he had to suppress his hunger. Slowly crawled to the man's place. He caught this person's pulse. After confirming that the man's lungs were problematic, Heoim took out the needle and prepared to treat it. But unexpectedly, a woman grabbed Heoim's wrist to stop him. The woman who held his hand was Yeon Kyung, and also a doctor. After pushing Heoim out, she immediately pulled out the stethoscope and other medical supplies. Heoim never thought that such a method could be used to treat diseases, and also didn't expect that in this place women were also doctors. When Yeon Kyung was about to leave, she was stopped by Heoim. He wanted to ask these questions to clarify, but Yeon Kyung considered him no different from a monstrous man. Taking advantages of Heoim's distraction, she kicked him in the leg. Then Heoim walked limping on the street because there was nowhere to go. He didn't know anything about traffic rules, so when he encountered a situation that the bus was about to rush, he didn't know how to avoid it, and he was almost hit. And Yeon Kyung on the other side of the road saw this scene and fainted. After Heoim saw she had fainted, he hurriedly ran over. When he was about to inject the needle, everyone around him whispered suspiciously. Heoim so hesitated that he couldn't do it, and the ambulance also came in time. He pretended to be a family member and went to the hospital with Yeon Kyung. At here, he saw much stuff of the modern world and also did a lot of stupid things. At the same time, Yeon Kyung also woke up. The reason she went out was that a patient didn't listen and ran around. Now the patient has been found. She has also woken up, so she went back to work as usual. The next day, Yeon Kyung met Heoim again. He asked Yeon Kyung that he heard that the doctors there are very rich, and if he could come there to work, but Yeon Kyung thought that he was a lunatic. After paying for Heoim's lunch, Yeon Kyung left. Heoim hadn't smelled rice for a long time, and when he was about to eat full, he saw a little girl sitting across from him, looking at the girl's strangely distraught gaze. Heoim had no choice. He kindly gave his lunch to her, but he didn't know that this girl was the patient Yeon Kyung was looking for. This patient had a myocardial infarction. At this time, Yeon Kyung was looking for her everywhere. Heoim saw Yeon Kyung's panicked eyes and was about to say something to her, but she called the security guard to kick him out. Therefore, Heoim couldn't back to the hospital. Fortunately, he saw the little girl earlier, maybe due to she was thankful for the meat he gave to her, and she let him push her wheelchair. Therefore, he was able to go to the hospital again, and so they became closer. The naughty little girl took his set of needles, and to get back the needle he had to chase her. But when entering the hall, the little girl was unconscious. The urgent situation forced him to use the needle to save people. At that time, Yeon Kyung also ran over. After checking her heart rate, she knew that Heoim had saved the patient. But unexpectedly, Yeon Kyung not only did not grateful for him, but also gave him a painful slap. It turned out that Yeon Kyung thought that Heoim was the one who took the patient out. In anger, Yeon Kyung called the police to take Heoim away. After he left, Yeon Kyung saw CCTV and learned that Heoim had indeed saved the girl's life. After arriving at the police station, the police carefully questioned Heoim. Strangely, there was no information about him in the file, and his fingerprints could not be verified, so he was detained at the station. Heoim saw that this policeman had something difficult to say, so he offered to help him with a medical examination. But when he was preparing for acupuncture, Yeon Kyung came. She bailed Heoim out and asked him not to give acupuncture to others because she thought Heoim didn't have a license to practice. Before Yeon Kyung left, she also helped Heoim stitch his wound. Seeing Yeon Kyung's back leave, Heoim could only wander alone, tired and sleepy. He relied on his feelings to go to a family. The owner of this house was the old man Chun's son, whom Heoim met at the police station, and he was also Yeon Kyung's grandfather. Heoim found out that this was Heminseo's hospital before. He was curious and asked about everything there, but Mr. Chun's son didn't seem to pay much attention to him, but he still kindly let Heoim sleep overnight. After After getting up the next day, Heo-yi found out that this place was a small oriental medicine clinic, and Mr. Chun's son was its owner, and the remaining one male and one female are both employees here. Heo-in looked at this empty clinic and asked the staff if their work there could feed them. However, he was kicked out without any response. Before leaving, saw a children's bicycle on the side of the road. Because of curiosity, he sat on the bike to try it out. Unexpectedly, the road ahead was slippery, so he rushed straight into people's car and got in the ambulance to the hospital again. When he arrived, coincidentally, this place was the hospital where Yeon Kyung worked. The nurses thought he was Yeon Kyung's boyfriend, so they called her. She saw Heo-im, who was clumsy, so she took him out. Before leaving, she still kindly helped Heo-im heal his wounds. After Yeon Kyung left, Heo-im met little Hara, who was about to run away again. While both of them was talking, Yeon Kyung found them. Heo-im hid behind in order not to make her angry. Before leaving, he told Hara, "Hey little girl, do you know what the hardest thing of being a doctor is? That is when you lose the person you want to save, even though you can save them." Maybe Heo-im's words were too sincere, so Hara agreed to the surgery. In the evening, when Heo-im was wandering in the hospital, he suddenly saw an ambulance. They said it was a group of people who had just been in a car accident. Heo-im suddenly thought of Yeon Kyung before, so he immediately ran into the hospital. At this time, Yeon Kyung was unconscious because she saw the person in an accident. Heo-im hurriedly picked up Yeon Kyung, but unfortunately, he was hit by a sharp iron on the patient's body while it was hung by a single hair. Heo-im found himself unconscious again. After waking up, he and Yeon Kyung were in a forest. It seemed that they had gone back to the time of Joseon. Heo-im didn't even have time to explain. A tiger suddenly appeared in the forest. To escape, he pulled Yeon Kyung's hand and ran away, until arriving at a safe place. Yeon Kyung was confused and couldn't believe that she had just gone back to Joseon. After an argument, Heo-im sneaked into Heminso's hospital. He changed into another outfit, and by the way, he stole a woman's clothes for Yeon Kyung. At this time, Yeon Kyung was being discussed because of her strange clothes. She looked at the crowd and the current place, and finally confirmed that she had arrived at Joseon's time. Just at this moment, a person was riding a horse rushed toward. When Yeon Kyung was about to be rushed by a horse, Heo-im appeared. He hugged Yeon Kyung in his arms, and then put a coat on her, and took her out of this place. After being taken away, she finally calmed down. She asked Heo-im why she went back to Joon's time. When Heo-im was about to explain, he suddenly remembered something. 2 times traveled time happened, which was the time he was about to die. As if he could be immortal. As long as he was ready to die, he could travel time, but he couldn't tell Yeon Kyung at this time. He gave her Joseon clothes and told her to put them on herself, but Yeon Kyung couldn't tie a bow. Heo-im has no choice but to help her. The intimate between the two made Heo-im blush, because the clothes he stole belonged to an aristocratic family's daughter, so when they met anyone on the street, they would all feel terrified. Seeing these poor children, Yeon Kyung hurriedly took out the candy in her pocket, calming their emotions. Heo-im standing there also had a different view about Yeon Kyung, but at this time, Heo-im was a wanted criminal, so he didn't dare to act too publicly, and then went to Heminso's hospital, leaving Yeon Kyung in a small corner. After that, Yeon Kyung was discovered. This person was Heo-im's archenemy. He asked Yeon Kyung, but she asked him back, so he had to apologize to her. But when Yeon Kyung left, he discovered that the shoes she was wearing were very strange. Yeon Kyung came to the door and saw someone fainting on the ground. She immediately took out the tools she had brought, intending to diagnose for that person. But when she was about to do it, he was prevented by Heo-im. He immediately stepped out to give acupuncture to the patient, using his method to save that person's life. The two of them were like performing a circus together, and then they went to an inn. Heo-im said that he had to go to Heminso's hospital again, so he left Yeon Kyung there. But unexpectedly, there were a few people who were Heo-im's enemies. They said that Heo-im was a hypocritical moralizer. Yeon Kyung heard these sarcastic words, so she proactively stood up to protect Heo-im. The group of people felt indignant and wanted to take Yeon Kyung away, but she immediately took out a pepper spray, causing them to fall behind temporarily, and listened to the owner's wife and went to Heo-im's wooden house. This time, she brought his enemies there. They stormed into the house and set it on fire, but this house contained the wealth that Heo-im had accumulated over the years. He looked at the treasure and wanted to rush into the sea of fire. This scene was also seen by Yeon Kyung next to him. She remembered what the others said. Could it be that Heo-im was really a hypocritic when the two of them were about to die into a sea of fire? But it was a miracle that they returned to Seoul again. After returning to Korea, Yeon Kyung immediately ran to the hospital room. Little girl, Hara was still waiting for her to have surgery, but Heo-im was left behind. He saw Shin-hee, Oriental Medicine Hospital's building not far away, and he decided to fight for his career again. He went to the reception and asked what to do to become a doctor there, but he met the man who had given flowers to Yeon Kyung, named Jae-ha by chance. He was Yeon Kyung's childhood sweetheart, and also the grandson of the director of this hospital. He looked at Haeoim strangely and said that the first thing to become a doctor there is to have a resume. After the successful surgery, Young-kyung was called to the director's office, where there was not only Director Shin, but also Director Jo of Shinhee Oriental Medicine Hospital there. He asked Young-kyung who was acupuncture for horror that day. Young-kyung sensed his evil intentions, so she told a white lie. But as soon as she came out of the door, she bumped into Haeoim. In order to keep him away from those people, Young-kyung pulled him into a corner. After those people left, she immediately pushed Haeoim out and let him return to his world, and said that people who was greedy for money like him couldn't become a doctor. After talking, the two of them went their separate ways. She didn't wait for Haeoim's explanation. Young-kyung left without looking back. Haeoim had nowhere to go. He had no choice but to go back to Mr. Chun-sun's house and asked him to help him pay for his ticket fare. He also eloquently said that he would definitely return it. Mr. Chun-sun asked what his name was. In his deaf heart, he also understood that he was the famous doctor in medical books because of the worship that Mr. Chun-sun kept Haeoim back. That night, Young-kyung returned home and found a man lying on the bed. After the two of them touched, they screamed at the same time. Then Haeoim found out that the old man was Young-kyung's grandfather, and it was Young-kyung's house. The next day, Haeoim wrote his resume to apply for a job, but Chun-sun witnessed this scene. He did not allow Haeoim to come to that messy place, and in addition, he must not leave there until he has paid money, and that Haeoim had no choice but to stay here and cleaned up or examined some old people. He met an old woman who suffered from dementia here. She had mistaken him for her son Bong-tuk, and the name Bong-tuk had become his common name there. But the thought of wanting to build his career was unstoppable, and when everyone didn't notice, he went to the hospital. He followed Director Jo and Jae-ha to the male toilet. When he was about to send his resume to them, only Young-kyung knew this news before. She was standing after the toilet door to listen to what him said, but then she couldn't help but rush in and drag him out of there. Haeoim's resume was in the hands of the director. Young-kyung pulled him out and began to ask. Unexpectedly, Haeoim, who has always been gentle, was angry this time. Do you know what that money means to me? You don't understand anything about me. Please do not judge other people's lives. After talking, Haeoim returned to Shinhee Oriental Medicine Hospital, but he saw a man lying in the ground. He was going to treat with acupuncture in this urgent situation, but was stopped by Young-kyung, and the subordinate thought that he was a lunatic who was causing trouble, so he wanted to catch him. Young-kyung motioned for Haeoim to run away, but the director had witnessed it all. Thanks to Young-kyung's support, Haeoim escaped misfortune, but his place was discovered by Jae-ha. He called Haeoim to go to a quiet place, told him directly that he was Young-kyung's burden, and told him to stop bothering Young-kyung. Haeoim returned home after that conversation. He had no choice but to pay Mr. Chun-sun's debt by doing housework. But people who are used to medical examinations like Haeoim undoubtedly will get used to this boring life. When he was dull, Mr. Chun-sun told him to pick up the bag, went to a place with him. They came to a corner of the station, and it was full of vagabonds. Mr. Chun-sun picked up the medicine cup and examined them for free. Seeing Haeoim standing there reluctantly, he told him to distribute the medicine for them. When they both finished their work and were about to leave, a homeless man suddenly lost consciousness. They came to that person's side. Mr. Chun-sun diagnosed the patient with indigestion, but when he was about to inject, Haeoim clearly saw that his hand holding needle was no longer steady. He couldn't bear to witness the patient die like this, so he offered to let him do this for him. With his support, the homeless man regained consciousness shortly afterwards, and among the cheers of the crowd, Haeoim also felt the long-lost happiness. After returning home, Haeoim opened the door and saw Young-kyung sitting on the porch. He thought Young-kyung should be kicked out of the hospital because of him, but Young-kyung told him that she had a day off that day. The topic between them gradually opened, and the more they talked, the happier they were. After that, Jae-ha immediately walked in. Seeing the two of them like that, he was extremely angry, but on the outside, he still pretended not to care. That night, both of them were so hungry that they had late dinner together. Young-kyung suddenly thought about what the psychiatrist had said before. She asked Haeoim if they had met before. Haeoim said no. Young-kyung also thought she was wrong. Who expected that Joseon was have a man in prison at this time, holding a photo of her childhood in her hand and saying something? The next day, the old woman taking the wrong child went to the Oriental Medicine Clinic. She took out a Niwang pill and said she wanted to share it with Haeoim. Unexpectedly, that pill causing Haeoim shed tears. It turned out that when Haeoim was a child, the Niwang was a luxury thing. When his mother was about to die, Haeoim brought the Niwang to treat her, but everyone in the hospital thought that he had stolen it. They not only took Niwang, but also insulted him. As a result, his mother died because she was not treated in time. Looking at this look of Haeoim, she seemed to understand why he loved money so much. After the medical examination, they both went to the supermarket. After shopping, they planned to go home, but there was a motorcycle accident on the road. Young-kyung fainted because of that scene. Haeoim took her to the hospital, but he couldn't back to the hospital due to the previous previous events. When he was anxiously waiting, Director Joe appeared. After waking up, Young-kyung didn't see Heo-im anymore. He just suddenly disappeared. A few days later, at the press conference of Shinhee Oriental Medicine Hospital, Young-kyung met Heo-im again after a long time. He was clean-shaven with a suit, looking bright. He appeared at the press conference as a doctor of the hospital. Heo-im on the first day of work. The patient he would treat was a person with sinusitis. He confidently injected a needle for the patient and successfully helped people feel comfortable. When he was satisfied, the patient suddenly had a nosebleed that could not be controlled. This was the first time Heo-im encountered such a situation, so he felt panicked. At this time, Jae-ha ran in, found out that the patient had taken Spirin spill before, which caused a nosebleed. Evening came, with a rock-bottom mood. Heo-im came to Hara's room. Seeing that the little girl was recovering, his mood was also much better. After leaving the room, he met Young-kyung. The relationship between the two of them softened a lot because of this meeting, but as soon as he walked out, he met Jae-ha to pick up Young-kyung. In front of Young-kyung, he insinuated that Heo-im was not good enough. He told Young-kyung to get in the car, and he needed to talk to Heo-im privately. But this time, Heo-im was no longer patient and said directly, "What are you worried about? You worried about the patient or your position?" But Jae-ha didn't care about what Heo-im said. After that conversation, as a result, the next day Jae-ha deliberately took revenge. He didn't arrange any patients for Heo-im. Unexpectedly, after Heo-im realized that he didn't have any patients, he went outside the clinic. He diagnosed the patients by looking at their faces and took advantage of this opportunity to distribute business cards to many people. This trick really worked. A lot of people lined up for Heo-im to be examined. Busy until noon, Young-kyung went to the canteen for having a meal. Accidentally, she met Heo-im here. As soon as sitting down, Heo-im asked her about information related to Spirin. Young-kyung answered questions one by one. Now Heo-im felt like he had found a straw to save his life. As long as he had problem with modern medicine, he would ask Young-kyung. Just like that, after a while, Heo-im's modern medicine knowledge advanced rapidly, and the opportunity also naturally came to him. One day, a counselor suddenly froze and unable to speak. The director invited Jae-ha and Heo-im to treat him. After Jae-ha finished diagnosing, he wanted to give acupuncture to the counselor, but he didn't expect that his acupuncture method had no effect at all. And Heo-im next to him saw the mistake. He wanted to try it, and his attempt saved the counselor. After he was done, he also explained the principle in the way of modern medicine, which made Jae-ha very embarrassed. And at this time, Young-kyung knew a news from a colleague. The director Joe invited him to work and seemed to have a plan. She immediately went to look for Heo-im. She told him to quit his job right away, as he might be in danger. "You still hate me so much, right?" he said. While they were arguing, a group of gangsters appeared to protect Young-kyung. He applied acupressure to take these people down, but he couldn't take precautions in time, so Heo-im was still hit in the head. As soon as he lost consciousness, the world was spinning. After waking up, they found themselves flying back to Joseon again. Just back there, they encountered a group of soldiers. Fortunately, there was pepper spray in Young-kyung's pocket. They used it to have a chance to escape. Then Heo-im hid Young-kyung in the room. It is said that the most dangerous place is the safest place, but unexpectedly, because they acted a bit obvious, they were still caught by Eugino. He took Heo-im to prison and took Young-kyung to his own place. In prison, Heo-im met the doctor Heo-jun, who recommended Heo-im to the emperor that year. The two of them looked at each other with 4 eyes. Heo-jun told Heo-im that he was an incompetent charlatan. Heo-im said that he was born in this dynasty was a mistake, but Heo-jun said, "So what do you get when coming to the world regardless of class division?" These words made Heo-im had knew that Heo-jun also knew the existence of 2 worlds. Looking at Heo-im's stunned face, Dr. Heo-jun told him that the distorted worldview was taking him in the wrong direction on medical path, so that he could go to the right path of a great doctor. At this time, a mandarin came to say that Heo-jun could be released. Before leaving, he added to Heo-im, "If a doctor doesn't know where his own value is, it's a pity." At the same time, Young-kyung was able to escape thanks to using a beauty trap. She had to go to save Heo-im, and as soon as she came to the door, she saw an old man. He was Dr. Heo-jun. Heo-jun took out the bag that Young-kyung had forgotten last time and said that the candy in it was very sweet, and he hadn't eaten it again for a long time. Young-kyung was surprised by his answer. Heo-jun seemed to know what she was going to say, so he said they would meet again in the future. He told Young-kyung that Heo-im had suffered a lot of hurt to become like that, and maybe only Young-kyung could change him. Heo-im in prison was thinking about Heo-jun's words. He recalled the past years. Because of his humble background, he was not had many opportunities, so doubts arose in his heart. At this time, he was rescued by a person, but he was the one who set fire to his house. This person had a stupid brother, and now he was beaten to death. So this person could only ask Heo-im for help. Heo-im remembered his responsibility as a doctor, so he immediately began to examine the patient. Young-kyung escaped and also met Heo-im's assistant. Maggie told Yunkyung. Hyo-im used to be an extremely kind person. He often went to the workers' room to examine them, and even refused the requests of the nobles. Once, when Hyo-im was examining a maid, they were detected by her master. In order to take revenge on the master who used extreme torture to torture Hyo-im, almost causing him to die, and the maid whom Hyo-im saved was also beaten to death by her master. Her daughter wanted to take revenge on the bastard owner, but was stopped by Hyo-im. The person was full of wounds, and the girl was none other than Maji. And at the same time, Hyo-im was curing the man's brother. Suddenly their master rushed in. He reprimanded Hyo-im as a low-class person, scolded him for daring to do anything with a little talent. He dragged the brother whom Hyo-im had saved and rained blows. The brother desperately called his brother's name before he died. Yunkyung was outside the door, and Hyo-im was kneeling on the ground, could only helplessly watch everything was going on. The sound of the stick mixed with the cry of his young brother. When he was released, he crawled to his older brother. At this time, he had to beg, admit that he was a coward, hope that noblemen would spare them. Looking at Hyo-im, he didn't look like the guy who always jokes around before. Seeing his urgency, the nobleman also spared them and locked them in the firewood storage room. Yunkyung secretly saved them out on that night. After burying the foolish brother, Hyo-im grabbed Yunkyung's hand, told the other person to get rid of him. After waking up, they really returned to Korea. But after this time travel, Hyo-im became extremely cold. He stood up and told Yunkyung to take care of herself. After talking, he left without looking back. Hyo-im absent-mindedly wandered on the road. Accidentally, he met the beggar at the station last time. He begged Hyo-im to treat another beggar's wound, but he didn't know why he was begging. Hyo-im hurriedly left. He seemed to remember something. After leaving, he immediately took off his clothes, picked up the needle, ran to the bridge, and threw it into the water. After experiencing this, it seemed that Hyo-im understood that, no matter what world he was in, there always had the class division. So in this world, he wanted to change himself, still fighting for power and money. After making that decision, he became ruthless. Until the next day, Hyo-im also greeted Yunkyung coldly. After showing an evasive attitude to her, he left. Director Jo took Hyo-im to a rich family. After showing his professionalism, Hyo-im gained the trust of that family. They took him into a room for examination, and as soon as the door was opened, Hyo-im saw a young man curled up on the bed. He knew that this boy was in a very bad psychological state by taking a look. After this tycoon's scolding, Hyo-im learned that his son was addicted after studying abroad, causing him to this state. Hyo-im began to treat him with acupuncture, and gradually, he no longer seemed too weak. Tycoon Park was also very pleased with him, but as soon as he was about to leave, the boy grabbed his hand. He begged Hyo-im to let him go, but he didn't agree. As more and more patients booked, Hyo-im had more and more money and resources. Under the leadership of Director Jo, he now only treats the rich. But even if he had those things, he was not happy. One day, the old woman, mistakenly recognizing Hyo-im was her son, had come to the hospital. She kept muttering that she had to meet him, but after seeing her, Hyo-im felt panicked. He said that if she suddenly sought him without saying anything, it would make him awkward. After talking, he left coldly. He went to the house of the addicted boy. Last time, while treating him, he stabbed Hyo-im with a sharp pen when he was not paying attention. After that, he took the opportunity to run out, but after running for a while, he lost consciousness for physical reasons, and then he was taken to the hospital where Yunkyung was working. Hyo-im didn't care about his injuries, followed him to the hospital. Yunkyung looked at him and wanted to ask him a few questions, but Hyo-im ignored her. At this moment, Director Jo called Hyo-im out. Yunkyung overheard their conversation. After Director Jo left, she called Hyo-im to stop. They argued for a while. Hyo-im left. In the evening, he came to the road near Mr. Chunsun's house. He met the old woman whom he examined. She told him that the old woman was unconscious on the road because she wanted to give him a cookie, and when Hyo-im heard that, he immediately ran to the place where the old woman was unconscious, and he was about to treat her, but he realized that he had thrown away the bag of needles. Hyo-im had no tools, listened to her increasingly weak heartbeat, and remembered the time when his mother left the world. He screamed and cried. Fortunately, at that moment, Yunkyung suddenly appeared. She immediately took out a bag of medicine to save her, and finally the old woman gradually opened her eyes, and they took her to the hospital together. Hyo-im hid in a corner because he didn't dare to face him. After finding him, Yunkyung said that the old woman was fine. At this time, Hyo-im said sorry to her because of what happened the night before. On the next day, Hyo-im and Yunkyung also got along much better. At noon, when he went to look for Yunkyung, he bumped into Jae-ha. He invited Hyo-im to a party. Hyo-im didn't know which trick Jae-ha was going to play, but he still agreed. While it was not time for the appointment, he went to meet Hara. While having a conversation, the little girl said that she wanted a gift, and Heo-im agreed. They went to a jewelry store. She chose a bracelet with a heart and told Heo-im that the heart also represents love. After receiving the gift, she gave it back to him, told him to give it to Yeon-kyung. It turned out that Hara had felt the difference between the two of them for a long time. She put the gift in Heo-im's hand and ran. Heo-im looked at the little girl and wanted to tell her not to exercise so hard. He couldn't expect that this was the last time he could see Hara. That night, Heo-im came to the party. Jae-ha deliberately created a fake identity for Heo-im to make it difficult for him. Just as Heo-im was confused, the director walked in. He helped Heo-im relieve and called Jae-ha privately and said that he was not allowed to make trouble with Heo-im until the next month. At this time, Yeon-kyung received a notification that there was an emergency surgery. Hara fainted again from exertion. Yeon-kyung looked at the girl's pale face and immediately started the surgery. Heo-im also heard the news and came to wait outside the door. But this time, Yeon-kyung couldn't save the little girl. Looking at the heart that was no longer beating, Yeon-kyung walked out of the operating room in shock. Heo-im was also indescribably sad. Tears kept falling. Yeon-kyung also cried as returning home. Her grandfather didn't know how to comfort her. Yeon-kyung was sad, so she wanted to run outside to breathe the air, but she met Heo-im, who was following her. At this time, Jae-ha also appeared to take Yeon-kyung away. On the way, Yeon-kyung remembered her childhood. Her father was waiting for her on the road, but because the speed was too fast, the doll fell. The father wanted to pick up a toy for his daughter, but unfortunately, he was hit by a truck. He was lying in a pool of blood. This psychological ghost made Yeon-kyung unable to breathe. She hurriedly got out of the car. Yeon-kyung walked while hugging her chest, but she did not see the big truck coming. When he saw Yeon-kyung was about to be hit, Im ran to hug her in his arms, and so they traveled time to Joseon again. After Heo-im comforted Yeon-kyung, he went to seek water for her to drink. At this moment, he discovered that the needle bag came back to him, and when Yeon-kyung was sitting alone, she met two kids, a boy and a girl. They shared their food with her. When they saw Heo-im coming, they hid in a corner, looking at the cute gestures of the two children. Yeon-kyung finally smiled, but the peace didn't last long, and then the village began to make noisy sounds. They were the Oa invaders. From the distance, Heo-im immediately rescued the two children. They took them into the forest, but their movements were still discovered by the Japanese enemies. They rushed to surround 4 people. At this moment, the general appeared. He was the one who saved Heo-im and Yeon-kyung last time. He asked his people to take Heo-im away and took Yeon-kyung and the 2 children to another place. He brought Heo-im into a room, asked him to cure him. If he didn't save him, Yeon-kyung and the 2 children were sent to the realm of hungry ghosts. Heo-im had no choice but to treat the person lying there. After curing the patients, they kept their promise to release them. When they were going home, the boy was hit by an arrow. Heo-im carried the boy to find a place to heal. Fortunately, there were a few monks who appeared. Because Heo-im had never seen a wound like this, so he could only let Yeon-kyung do it for him. But Yeon-kyung looked at the wound and remembered little girl, Hara. Heo-im told her to try her best. With the doctor's responsibility, thanks to Heo-im's encouragement, Yeon-kyung performed surgery on the boy. After a few days of convalescence, they were about to take the 2 children home. But when they arrived in the village, they found that this place had been slaughtered. The bodies were lying paralyzed. Seeing this scene, they had to stay to cure everyone. While they were talking, Yeon-kyung suddenly remembered the accident that year. She was saved by a person, and that person was the Dr. Heo-jun. She immediately decided to go to see him to solve the mystery. They went to the place where Heo-jun lived, but he wasn't there. But the good thing that they met Maggie, but they weren't happy for a while. A group of people surrounded them. They came to catch Heo-im because Maji was not involved, so he told her to run first. Facing the ridicule from Sim Young-hun, Heo-im was angry and provoked. He ordered to hit Heo-im. At this moment, there was a person who took Yeon-kyung away. It was Jino, who was standing in a corner watching them. He saved Yeon-kyung. At this time, a sword suddenly pierced Heo-im's back. Yeon-kyung was being detained, so there was no way to help him. After waking up, Heo-im realized that he was the only one who had returned to Korea, and there was no Yeon-kyung beside him. He hurriedly got up and wanted to return to Joseon, and then Heo-im fainted again. Passers-by took him to the hospital. After waking up, the first thing Heo-im did was to ask for suicide. He wanted to take the knife from the doctor's hand, but unexpectedly, the doctor thought he was crazy, so he gave him a sedative injected to help him fall asleep. At that time, Jae-ha also rushed to the hospital. He looked at Heo-im on the hospital bed, but he didn't see Yeon-kyung's figure. Jae-ha rushed to Heo-im and asked him loudly, and he wanted to go back to Joseon, even if his hands and feet were tied up. So he just asked Jae-ha to untie him. Jae-ha saw that Heo-im didn't look like he was lying, so he untied him, and Heo-im took the opportunity to take out a needle bag and stabbed him in the chest with a needle. So Heo-im once again traveled time to Joseon. But when he arrived in Joseon, he found that Yeon-kyung was no longer there. On the ground, there was still some blood printed, and on this side, Yeon-kyung had also woken up. The person who saved her was the doctor, Heo-jun. Hyo-jun knew that Yeon-kyung had remembered everything that year because she was too young, that he didn't understand what kind of way he traveled time to Korea. On the first day he came here, he witnessed Yeon-kyung's father's car accident, so he took her back to take care of her. But because that memory was so painful, Yeon-kyung chose to forget it, and a moment later, Hyo-im was sent by Hyo-jun to meet Yeon-kyung. They tightly hugged each other after so many things. Not long after they said goodbye to Dr. Hyo-jun to return to Korea, Hyo-im had just arrived in Korea and took Yeon-kyung to the hospital. He was always by her side even now, when dealing with a wound. He was afraid that the doctor was too heavy-handed and the stitches were bad, as if the person doing it was him. After treating the wound, Hyo-im still take care of Yeon-kyung. As a result, they slept in the same bed and were even seen by their colleagues during checking the room, and the relationship between them also flourished during the time Yeon-kyung's stay in the hospital. After a sweet time, Yeon-kyung looked at him a little sluggishly, so she told him to go home and change his clothes. Hyo-im dropped by to meet Director Jo, by the way. The director also seemed to know about Dr. Hyo-jun, but no matter what Hyo-im asked, he refused to answer frankly. In the evening, Hyo-im went to the hospital to take care of Yeon-kyung. While talking, Hyo-im introduced the acupuncture points on the body. When he introduced to the point on the face, it seemed that both of them were expecting something. Indeed, Hyo-im kissed Yeon-kyung when it came to lips, and Yeon-kyung didn't refuse. They used this way to express their feelings for each other. Yeon-kyung and Hyo-im returned to work on the next day. Director Jo took Hyo-im to another tycoon's house. Hyo-im deliberately caused trouble during the diagnosis, did not match Director Jo's explanation. He did it to make these people angry, and then escaped from the control of Director Jo. Hyo-im left his Shin-hee Oriental Medicine Hospital and back to the grandfather Chun-sun. He wanted to become a real doctor there. Jung-kyung also saw that Hyo-im had returned, although she knew that one day, Hyo-im would have to return to his world. But facing this feeling, she still felt happy. Besides being immersed in love, Hyo-im was also more responsible for this clinic. He not only proactively took care of the errands, but also worked hard to examine the old. And Yeon-kyung also determined her feelings. When Jae-ha tried to break up, she still chose to listen to her heart. But when she came home, Yeon-kyung didn't see Hyo-im anymore. She was extremely confused, was afraid that Hyo-im would suddenly disappear. Fortunately, when she ran to the back of the house, she saw that Hyo-im was feeding the dog. It turned out that she liked Hyo-im more than she imagined. At this time, Hyo-im also turned around, perhaps seeing her. He was too excited and stumbled to the ground. She immediately blamed her lover. "Are you crazy? You have to be careful." Looking at Yeon-kyung's emotional face, Hyo-im knew what she was worried about. He tightly hugged Yeon-kyung and said that he had promised himself that he would never leave her alone. Even if he accidentally traveled time, he would think of the fastest way to get back there. Yeon-kyung was relieved after listening to his promise and hugged even tighter. Coincidentally, at this time, Yeon-kyung was on vacation, so they were in the clinic living happily together. At the same time, Director Jo was not okay at all because of Hyo-im. The tycoon family that he broke last time helped Director Jo's opponent to become the general director. This made Director Jo very angry. He seemed to be planning to do something to Hyo-im. One day, Hyo-im planned to take Yeon-kyung out for a medical examination, but just came out the door, he met Jae-ha. It was strange that when he saw them holding hands, Jae-ha was not angry at all. On the contrary, he wanted to follow them to the station to see how it was. Hyo-im seemed to be familiar with all the steps. He helped these beggars to cure the disease. Looking at Hyo-im's treatment, Jae-ha felt a little admiration, because he already knew Hyo-im's identity before. After the medical examination for the beggar was done, Hyo-im and Yeon-kyung went on a date, but their happiness didn't last long. The day before, these two beggars came to the clinic in polite clothes. They said they didn't feel well, but when they were examined, there was something strange. After a while they left, but when they got to the door, one of them fainted. At this time, the ambulance and the police also came. Another beggar pointed at Mr. Chun-sun and said, because of his acupuncture, the patient fainted. So they took Mr. Chun-sun to the police station. The police told Hyo-im that Mr. Chun-sun might have to go to jail. Hyo-im had to ask the police for help, but he said, 20 years ago, Mr. Chun-sun caused a medical accident, so it was hard not to suspect that he did this. At the same time, the person who had surgery on the beggar was Yeon-kyung. She felt that there was something wrong. Indeed it was. After the surgery, Yeon-kyung found that there were aspirin pills in that patient's bag. At that time, the police came to investigate. Yeon-kyung told the police what she knew. Hyo-im also took the police to the hospital. The beggar Chan-sung insisted that he didn't know anything. He was just a victim. The police heard that, and they thought that Mr. Chun-sun had killed the patient. Hyo-im suddenly remembered the day when Chan-sung told that he had to let Mr. Chun-sun gave him acupuncture. He remembered what Director Jo said before he left. After all these clues were matched, Hyo-im seemed to understand something. He went to Director Jo's room. Director Joe threatened him that if he left like that, then Mr. Chun's son will spend the rest of his life in prison, and he will not be able to stay in the hospital in peace. But Heo-im told the old fox that he could solve the problem, and Director Joe also drove to the police station, and he went to see Mr. Chun's son. The two of them had an argument about something, but Jae-ha overheard this conversation by chance. What happened between them 20 years ago? In order to prove Mr. Chun's son's innocence, Heo-im showed it to the police himself. The needle will not pierce the heart. At this time, Mr. Chun's son had also been released because he was still under investigation, so he will not be arrested for too long. Heo-im took him home. Looking at Mr. Chun's son, Heo-im remembered the request of Director Joe that night. He decided to go to the hospital again on his behalf. Heo-im followed the director to the house last time. There was a person in this house who could not be cured, no matter what the treatments were. But Heo-im realized that this person had a nervous breakdown, so he started treatment. Just as he was about to inject the needle, his hands trembled unconsciously. He remembered what the Dr. Heo-jun had said before. It turned out that when he injected the needle, if he had bad intentions, his hands would tremble. Nobody expected that Mr. Chun's son would come to the hospital to visit Chun-san. He also brought him food. He hoped that Chun-san would recover quickly and get back to his children. Jae-ha had also grasped Director Joe's loophole. His game was about to end. Mr. Chun's son said to Heo-im, to save himself 20 years ago, Dr. Heo-jun worked for Director Joe, so he didn't want Heo-im to do the same thing. Heo-im just did what a doctor should do. On the next day, Mr. Chun's son went to the police station. Chun-sung told the truth because of his guilt. Mr. Chun's son was also released. After experiencing this, Heo-im knew what the responsibility of a real doctor was. He remembered that year when he came to the Hanyang Palace. He couldn't save that little girl, so he felt very sorry. But Yun-kyung told him that the girl was still alive, which made Heo-im very happy. To fulfill his old promise, he decided to return to Joseon again. Heo-im returned to Joseon, but strangely, it was very quiet. He suddenly remembered that Owa soldiers told him they would send troops into Hanyang soon. It seemed that this place had been occupied by Japanese pirates. When Mr. Chun's son was in Korea, he suddenly fainted. Then Yun-kyung found out that his illness was very serious. She had to call an ambulance to take his grandfather to the hospital and prepare for his surgery. Heo-im overcame the enemy to Heo-jun's place. He saw Yun-kyung's bag in the house. Inside was a letter written to him. He followed the instructions in the letter to go to a small house. Maggie and Heo-jun were still alive. Heo-jun knew exactly what Heo-im wanted to do. He went to the little girl and healed the wound. When he caught his pulse, he knew that the child seemed to have heart disease. While discussing with the Dr. Heo-jun about the cure, suddenly a group of Japanese pirates appeared outside the yard. At the same time, Mr. Chun's son in South Korea refused to operate. He thought that his son and daughter-in-law had died earlier than him, so he had no face to do the surgery. And Heo-im was also surrounded by Owa enemies at this time. They were going to kill all the people in Heo-im's house. While it was hung by a single hair, a group of villagers ran out to intercept all these enemies. Looking back, it was the ill-fated guy's younger brother before. He told Heo-im that he had become a soldier for justice. He also wanted to save more people's lives like Heo-im did. Heo-im looked at this person and suddenly realized he had changed the lives of many people unconsciously. After reviewing the old story, the two of them said goodbye. Heo-im told the little girl that if she wanted to be cured, they had to try together. The little girl nodded gently. The knot in her heart was loosened. The higher the cure rate, and Yun-kyung finally persuaded her grandfather to have surgery. Everything seemed to be going well. 20 years ago, Director Joe had bribed to falsify evidence of a medical incident, and this was exposed. None of the bureaucrats and tycoons whom he helped didn't care about him, and nobody knew how long it took. One morning, Yun-kyung heard a noise in the kitchen as she was going to work. She raised her head and saw Heo-im, whom she had longed for day and night. Hello, Yun-kyung. I told you to wait, but you are impatient. Heo-im also knew about his grandfather, so he came to visit him. After visiting him, he and Yun-kyung planned to talk, but Yun-kyung was called by the emergency department. Heo-im followed closely behind. During the busy break, she saw Heo-im's eyes. She knew that when seeing her busy, he also wanted to be treated by patients. Yun-kyung didn't want Heo-im to lose the right to pursue his dreams because of her. But if he did, Heo-im would return to Joseon, and they would never see each other again. That night, Yun-kyung returned home and took Heo-im to many places. They walked in Seoul at night while having fun. Heo-im suddenly said sorry. Yun-kyung knew what this meant. She told him that she would protect that place, and Heo-im should also protect his Joseon. So they broke up like that. Before leaving, Yun-kyung taught Heo-im some modern medical knowledge. Besides studying, they also made travel plans. When Heo-im returned, they appreciated their sweet moments when they were together. The time for separation was getting closer and closer. Their mood was being at the bottom of the abyss. Seeing Yun-kyung cried, Heo-im was also very sad. He wiped tears and said what was in his heart. They hugged each other and left tears that could not be separated. After saying goodbye, Heo-im stabbed his heart again, backed to Joseon. The situation there was more dangerous than he imagined. Owa army had slaughtered entire people in the city. The country is full of mourning and suffering. Heo-im can only try his best to save their lives. During this process, he had seen more death than life. But Heo-yi didn't give up, because it was his mission. Sometimes it was too difficult. He thought about how good he was in the other world. From autumn to winter, Heo-im's beard grew longer due to overwork. His body felt unwell. In the process of treating patients, Heo-im also met the person who oppressed him in the past. He was in a dying state. Seeing Heo-im coming, he also thought that it was an insult to Heo-im. He couldn't forget that shame, but as a doctor, he chose to save him. On the new treatment, Yeon-chun saw a patient who looked exactly like the deceased little Hara. This little girl, like Hara, is naughty and disobedient. But this time, Yeon-kyung was feeling much lighter. The hospital had also established a special treatment department for children with heart disease and was sponsored by Hara's mother. Everyone uses their way to create good things. Jae-ha also considered her as a sister then, taking as a younger brother to take care of her. And Jae-ha has also become one of the people in charge of medical assistance at the station. He maintained a good relationship with those beggars and was also working hard with benevolence and righteousness toward Heo-im. He has returned to Hemin-seo Hospital. There were still countless people coming for examination every day, and the Owa Solider who saved them before also brought his juniors there, probably because he had killed too many people. His current name was Young-soon. One day when Heo-im was thinking about Yeon-kyung, Dr. Heo-im came. He told Heo-im that the emperor's ear tumor had not cured, so he wanted to do acupuncture. Heo-im agreed. This time before leaving, just like the scene that year, there was also a little girl who came to ask for help. But Heo-im didn't wait anymore. He treated her immediately. After curing the patient, he entered the palace. Thanks to Heo-im's treatment, the emperor's illness was finally cured, but he didn't care about being rewarded. Compared to it, he missed his woman even more. Yeon-kyung's medical service station grew stronger and stronger. Many doctors and nurses volunteered to serve. One day, when they set up a treatment booth as usual, a man came. He wore Joseon-era clothes, just like the first time they met. Heo-im chirpingly asked Yeon-kyung, "Do you have a boyfriend?" Yeon-jun was extremely happy when she saw him back. The movie is over. Thank you for watching the video. Goodbye, and see you in the next episodes on the channel.